So this unit is about the United States becoming a world power, or becoming an imperialist nation. We have pictured here a picture of Teddy Roosevelt, who was a president who truly believed the United States should spread its power and influence around the world. And as president, before he was president, and even after he was president, he played a large role in changing the way people viewed America and how America viewed the way it should interact with other nations. So, undoubtedly, in the past, when you've studied United States history, you've talked a lot about how the United States has grown within its borders. Now, we want to take a moment and talk a little bit about how it's growing outside its borders. The word we're going to be using a lot this unit is the word imperialism. And we need to define that. Your textbook defines it as the economic and political domination of a strong nation over other weaker nations. And in the United States' case, and in other countries' cases as well, there were really three reasons why they wanted to expand. The first is going to be a desire for new markets, places to buy and sell economic products. The second is going to be a feeling of superiority. A lot of times, nations felt that their culture or their ethnicity or religious values or things along those lines were superior to other parts of the world, and they wanted to spread those values. And we'll talk about the flaws in those perspectives. And then finally, everyone else was doing it. There's a lot of competition, and so countries were asking themselves, which do we want to be? Do we want to be strong, or do we want to be weak? So we need to go through these issues one at a time. The first issue, the need for new markets. So the United States, after the Civil War, went through a period of rapid industrialization, and that means that with an expansion in businesses, there's an expanded need for raw materials. No country had all the natural resources they needed in order to fuel their economy, so they look elsewhere in the world, see if they can get their resources from other places. The second is, because of the industrialization, you now have the need for new markets to sell all of their products. And so once again, if you can't sell all of your products to people within your country, you look elsewhere. And then finally, these businesses are going to look for places to invest all of this profit that they're making. They can invest their money not only within the United States, but also elsewhere. So we're going to go over a little bit of the vocabulary right now. When we use the word colony, we're talking about a region that is completely controlled by another country. So Great Britain was known for having lots of colonies around the world. Of course, the United States began as British colonies. They were completely controlled by the British government at the time. Other times, however, local rulers are allowed to maintain partial control. So when you talk about imperialist nations, sometimes they don't completely control the countries that they're influencing. However, they still have what are called protectorates, where the imperialist nation will basically protect, if you will, the ruler of a country from invasion, and in return, the ruler of the country will do what the imperialist nation wants them to. And there are many examples of the United States doing that. I have a picture of the Terminator, the ultimate protector. The second reason for imperialist feelings or wanting to be imperialist is the feeling of superiority that we talked about. And we're going to be talking about this quite a bit in class and looking at some documents. In the United States, we talk about the idea of Anglo-Saxonism, or the idea that English-speaking nations had superior character, ideas, and systems of government than other non-English-speaking nations. There's really no other way to say it than that this belief was discriminatory, racist, in a belief in ethnic superiority over other parts of the world. You can compare this idea to the idea of manifest destiny and social Darwinists, people who believe that some people were born with greater gifts and greater abilities to be successful than others. They really found this idea appealing. There's a famous poem about it called The White Man's Burden, and a minister named Josiah Strong was someone who traveled around the country promoting the ideas of Anglo-Saxonism. So we're going to talk about both of these two individuals in class. The third reason countries wanted to be imperialist, everyone else was doing it. All the cool kids were doing it. So the other countries that we've been looking at, Great Britain, Spain, France, the Netherlands, they're all increasing their imperialist holdings. And if you look at the map If you look at a map of the world, the United States realizes that they're behind their European counterparts and they needed to follow suit in order to keep up with them. One of the situations we'll be talking about is the annexation of Hawaii in the late 1800s. The United States had realized that if they wanted to sustain trade with Japan and with China, they needed a place to stop along the way. They needed naval ports in the Pacific Ocean. It's a pretty complicated story that we'll talk more about, but the long and short of it is that throughout the 1800s, Hawaii was ruled by a monarch, and as Americans became more invested in the islands, not only seeing it as a strategic outpost, but also as a place where American farmers and growers were investing significant amounts of money, they recognized that it would be beneficial if these islands were added to the United States as American territory. And American settlers actually played an instrumental role in organizing an uprising against Queen Liliuokalani, the Hawaiian queen. And they actually got U.S. military support, and the U.S. Marines came and actually helped in this uprising. So we'll talk about whether or not it's appropriate for the United States to be overthrowing independent governments in order to have a strategic or economic benefit. In addition to looking out west in the Pacific Ocean, Americans also look south towards Latin America, Central and South America. The U.S. saw an opportunity for vast profit in these markets in Latin American countries that they hadn't been exploiting before. They saw that there was money to be made. The idea of Pan-Americanism, which was an idea promoted by the U.S. Secretary of State James G. Blaine, really promoted the idea of America, the United States, and Latin American countries working together. And it seems like kind of a nice idea on the surface, but ultimately it doesn't really catch on, and a lot of the interactions that America, the United States, is going to have with Latin American countries are going to be forced. Some of them are going to be violent, or some of them are going to involve conflicts, and we'll be talking about those later on in the unit. Ultimately, there are some positive ideas that come out of this, and what eventually becomes an organization called the Organization of American States is formed, and there are groups that do emerge that try to coordinate activities between the United States and other Latin American countries. But it's much more complicated than simply working together and everything goes fine, as we'll see when we take a look at specific interactions that the United States has with a number of different Latin American countries. As Americans do begin to move west to Hawaii or south into Latin America, there becomes a recognition that in order to be a powerful country that can spread their influence to other parts of the world, a strong military is necessary. So what does a country really need? If the U.S. is looking to expand to the west, in particular, across the Pacific Ocean, what do they need? And ultimately, the realization is they need a modern navy. Alfred T. Mahan is an individual who wrote a book called The Influence of Sea Power Upon History. And he looked back at history and he recognized that the strongest countries were always the ones that had the strongest navies. And he strongly advocated for the building and expansion of a strong American Navy. And it's going to be this Navy that's going to be instrumental in the United States being able to expand their influence around the world. And without the Navy, the story would be much different. So this is a very, very important book that has a lot of influence on a lot of people in Congress who end up reading it. One of the guys in particular who reads this book and really buys into it is a congressman named Henry Cabot Lodge, and he strongly advocates for the construction of the Navy, and many other politicians are going to go along with this. And so the United States, as they begin to expand, they grow their military, they have developed motivations for wanting to move into other parts of the world and have economic ties there and military ties and political ties. And as we move forward in this unit, we're going to talk specifically about where they go, why they go there, what the consequences of it are, and whether or not it was a good or a bad thing.